Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm going to give a quick lecture on how I like to animate. I'm not a professional animator. I took a lot of animation classes in school, but I am more of a graphic designer who likes to animate and do motion graphics, and the difference between those two fields is the topic for a longer discussion. But my friend Sam today asked me for some demos of how I like to animate quickly, on the fly, cheap, just hacking things together, and I thought I'd share some different ways to animate. There's a lot of ways that I animate, but there's three ways that I'm going to show here that are super easy and somewhat inexpensive that I like to do. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was stop motion photography. Stop motion animation is probably the closest thing you could get to like film or cinema, because you are taking photographs of something in reality and making it move. So here's a little clip I just made earlier of this pumpkin toy that I have spinning around in circles. And this is super easy to make, super easy to do once you know kind of the software and the tools and everything. So stop motion animation is really a lot of fun. The term animation comes from anima, like to bring to life. So it's kind of great that you can take something in reality that doesn't move, like an egg or a toy or a shoe, and you can make it move. And it's really exciting. So the way that I like to do stop motion animation is through this app called Stop Motion Studio, which you can get on your phone, computer, iPad, whatever. And it just lets you, there's a camera within the app that lets you take successive photographs, and it has these nice grids, which is super awesome for keeping alignment and registration perfect. I did this on the fly without, just like literally with my hand, without a tripod or good lighting or anything. But you can obviously get as professional as you'd like. This app is great. It's free. There's like a couple dollar version where you can take photos in another app or on your phone or on a fancy camera and then import them into the app and edit it there. So this is like the whatever, it was $2 or $5. It's something I got years ago when I started school. And I use it all the time. It's not super fancy. It's really easy to learn, and it works great for what I need it to do. If you're looking for something kind of like easy and quick, this is how I make most sort of like quick things for Instagram. I know there's better video editing software out there, but because I don't do a lot of fancy social media stuff, this is sort of what I use, and it's good for what I'm interested in. Within the app, it lets you fix the frame rate for the images. Animation and all cinema works on this principle of 24 frames per second. What that means is each image is called a frame. And when you are looking out into the real world, your eyes perceive basically like 24 photographs per second. So if you took 24 photographs within a second of the world in front of you and then played it back through a projector at 24 frames per second, to your eye, it would look like fluid motion. And that's how films work. And that's how animation works. The animation that I do is not 24 frames per second. I think I took only, for this clip, I took like eight photographs and then ran it back at 8 photographs per second, which, I mean, you can tell it doesn't look perfectly fluid. But sometimes you don't need it to be that fast. Not that fast. You don't need it to be that clear for whatever you're trying to do. This conveys the sense of motion that I needed it to for this particular project, and it took me 5 minutes. Obviously, if you're working on something else, something larger scale, you might want to have 12 frames per second, which is called animating on twos. And that's close enough to real life that it won't necessarily matter. Obviously, these are generalizations, and like people in the animation industry have a lot of different opinions about things. I know video games actually run at a rate of more frames per second than we can actually perceive. Not entirely sure how that works, but my point is, if you're just starting out, you don't need to worry about a lot of these things. You just need to know that, like, if I played this back at 5 frames per second, it would seem slower. And then if I played it back at like 24 frames per second, it would seem like really condensed because I only took those 8 images. So, and I intended them to be at 8 frames per second. This is getting a little too in the weeds. Stop Motion Studio, great way to do stop motion animation. It's also great if you have drawings that you've done for a flip book, which I'll talk about later. And then you can take photos of each drawing and then composite them in Stop Motion Studio, and then it'll animate it for you, which is really nice and something I've used before. The next kind of animation I wanted to talk about is Procreate animation. Procreate is not the best tool for animation. They're actually releasing a new program called Procreate Dreams a little bit later, I think in November maybe. So Procreate is like good for basic easy things. It has like a few animation presets which are useful that I'll talk about. But basically, if you want to use digital drawing and you don't want to pay for something like one of the fancier animation softwares that can cost like hundreds of dollars, it's kind of tricky. It's hard to talk about having access to these things because often animation and design software is very expensive. If you want like the Adobe suite, it's very expensive. You need a laptop. Laptops are expensive. iPads are expensive. So that's why I'm saying like these are like cheap options, assuming you already have like a phone or a laptop, which is already kind of a level of access that is denied to a lot of people. But if you have an iPad, this is like who I'm sort of explaining this part of the video for. iPads are not cheap, but if you have one, Procreate, I think, is like, I don't even remember how much money it is, like $9 or $20 or something, but it's not a subscription fee. It's not like Photoshop. So you pay for it once and then you can use it for as long as the app is in existence, which is actually makes it more accessible than a lot of subscription-based apps. So in that sense, Procreate, more expensive than Stop Motion Studio, less expensive than some of the other options. And I definitely think it's a little bit of a learning curve, but like easy enough. So with Procreate, basically you can open up your document settings and there's this little button called Animation Assist and you toggle it and it allows you to start animating. What I did is I made this little grass, whatever, and I set it as the background image. For whatever reason, Procreate only allows you to use one background image, which is kind of annoying, and hopefully that's something they fix for the new app, because obviously if you're making a film, your background is going to change. It's not going to be the same thing throughout the film. So anyways, this is what I created, and then I toggled that little thing. When that toggles, your background image is going to be the bottommost layer, and it's going to be pushed to the left of your play button here, just so that it reminds you that that is your whatever, that's your background. Then what you're going to do is, just like if you've used Procreate before, if you haven't, I'm sorry, this is like going way too fast, but if you have, these are all the layers. And normally when you're drawing in Procreate, it's good to have different layers because you can draw like the outlines of your character on one layer and then you can shade it in a different layer. And like, that's like the sense of layers. In this sense, Procreate is treating each layer like a frame. So you have to draw every element of your character in each layer, right? So it wouldn't let you, for example, have like one layer that has an outline and one layer that has the colors in it. You would want to collapse that into one layer because each layer is going to read at a frame. It's going to basically project each layer one sequentially after the other. So if, for example, I had one layer in here that had an outline, it would just show the colors first, and then it would show the outline. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't read as animation. So for Procreate, you want to keep your characters or whatever you're animating like a little bit simple, or at least have that conception that that's how it'll change what it means to have a layer. And then basically you can play down here and then it'll show you the animation. You can also, obviously in Procreate, you can change the frame rate that I was talking about earlier. So you can, with the same animation you can speed it up or slow it down, which is really nice. And then there's some other stuff in here about onion skinning. And if I'm correct, this is the video. So I just made a little bouncing ball. And the great thing about Procreate and Stop Motion Studio is that you can export as a GIF or as an MP4. Here it's looping it automatically in the app, but obviously when you export, if you export as an MP4, it'll only export the one loop. So you have to consider that when you're editing it further if you want it to continuously loop. The last thing I'm going to talk about is like way cheaper and one of my favorite things, which is flipbooks. You can make a flipbook out of anything. If you have scrap paper, you can just draw and then flip it. And then you know, you don't have to be worried about literally anything. It's wonderful. I have 2 flip books that I wanted to show here. Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find the other one. The other one that I was gonna show is something that I used for my thesis, because I did some animation for my thesis, which is awesome. I can talk about that on a different video. But that one, I just, like, drew something, brought it into Illustrator, and then printed out, on each page, like, 9 different drawings that were, like, different frames, and then cut them out, stapled them together, and then used it as a flip book. So that's, you know, super easy. This is something I made in college before I ever thought I would be an animator or a designer or a professional artist. And I took Polaroids, and I used stop motion and Polaroids to make a flip book. And it's like one of my favorite pieces I've ever made. I set up different my pair of shoes across my room and then had them move each and every frame, and then took a photo of every single frame and then turned it into this flip book. Polaroids are also not cheap, but you don't need to use Polaroids to make a flip book. You can, as I said, use a piece of paper and a pencil and have it be literally as cheap as that. A lot of really great ideas and pencil tests can start out as flip books. It's kind of it's nice to be able to make something kind of on the fly and physical and tactile. There's a lot of different kinds of animation, and I didn't even cover, like, there's so many. I can talk about them really briefly, but stop motion, like I said, is very much about objects in the real world and manipulating them and having fun in that regard. Pencil or like hand-drawn animation is a little bit different, because you are literally fabricating everything. You have to create the background, the characters, the motion, any dialogue, anything. Like, you are completely creating a fantastic magical world on your own. Some people like having that amount of control. Some people also like working where the character is already set up for you. You can either make a puppet or you can just like use toys that you already have. And there's like different levels of, I guess, control or manufacture that goes into different kinds of animation. Animation as a whole is like an incredibly detailed, difficult but fun and rewarding medium. As I said, I'm not an expert. These are just things that I've created in different ways that I work for, like, the small things that I need. If you get a little bit more advanced or interested in some of these techniques, you can learn about programs like After Effects that Adobe released that, like, you can bring in different clips and composite them together. You can add different effects. You can do green screen. You can add in audio and sync dialogue and add subtitles and like do all of these things. And then it becomes a process of animating, but also video editing. And that's sort of when you have a discussion of, like, in a sense, these are all really highfalutin art forms and mediums, but then at the same time, it becomes like a lot of like practical utilitarian discussion of like how to actually do things. So these are just some things that I like. I also like rotoscoping, which is a process by which you like film someone doing something or an animal doing something, and then you go in and like trace the image of that person or animal. And then you take the original image out, and so you just have the traced line or drawing of the elements that you've chosen to highlight from each individual frame. And then you play it back, and it's like an interesting mix between the real world and your hand as an animator and artist. So that's something I like. This is only scratching the surface of the medium. I love animation so much. I have so much respect for animators, and I hope this is useful for my friend Sam. And we'll see. So thanks for watching.